Alright, Shalom. Want to begin by giving all glory and praises to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha, Kodash. Double honors to our beloved elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Shalom to the hopefully elect. And Shalom to all the Akim pushing this truth with sincerity. It's the brother Itazawon from the GMS Columbus, Ohio branch, coming back with another video through the Spirit. This may be very brief. I'm going to weigh it out through the Spirit, but through the Spirit, been doing some digging and studying, going over some things, material, all right, for Daniel, the 11th chapter. Been heavy in it, which that book is very, very heavy, all right. And through the Spirit, I recommend, if you haven't already, because, going into it is very intimidating. But once you get the understanding of Daniel, the 11th chapter, and the importance of it, dealing with the Syrian wars and, ultimately how it led up to the Hellenization of the Jews, okay, and, some very prominent history in the Maccabees, I recommend you go into it in depth, if the Spirit allows. But in any event, I was thinking about this first Maccabees 2, all right, going over it, watching some videos, etc. And man, this book is very, very heavy, all right. In particular, this chapter harping on the situation dealing with the sons of Mattathias, all right, and his family, his legacy, and how these men, all right, stood up against Antiochus Epiphanes IV, and against those wicked Israelites that were in league with him at that time. Because when you go into it, when you deal with First Maccabees, this is pretty much an abridged account concerning the rise of the Greek Empire, the four generals that stem from it, and their family tree, all right, when you dive into this chapter. Because these Maccabees were letters being sent to different Israelites in the various regions, I believe in particular Egypt, okay, who were scattered, obviously, and those who were witnesses of these accounts wrote these things down, all right, to send to like I said, scattered Israelites, okay. But ultimately, like I said, you go into it, it deals with, in particular, Alexander. The Greek Empire was pretty much on the rise already, okay? But we understand that Alexander was one of the most prominent kings of the Greeks at that time, all right, or just in history in general, in the secular history. Like I said, a lot of Hellenization, etc., from his four generals start being pushed, and started being heavily pushed during Antiochus Epiphanes IV reign, okay. At this time, in the midst, you had the Sixth Syrian War, so on and so forth, okay. And at this point, when you deal with Antiochus Epiphanes IV, when you go into it, when he, fully decided to, pollute the temple, etc., it's pretty much off of the wrath and anger and embarrassment that he had received prior to doing this act, all right, by the hands of a Roman general. I forget his name, all right, but pretty much this man, drew a circle around Antiochus. And at that moment, Antiochus had to, decide to stay in the circle and deflect the war with the Romans at that time, or step out and cause one, But, him being smart, he decided to stay and shake on it. I believe his name is like Gaius, if I'm not mistaken. Lord's will, I'm gonna, go into it more in class. But at this point, he's mad. You see? So he set his eyes upon the nation of Israel. He sacked the temple. He already had, men who were in league with him at that time. In particular, Menelaus. All right. Prior to that, it was Jason. Okay, which, he pretty much finessed Jason and set up Menelaus. All right, at this time. Okay. But pretty much, Salakia, backing up. But pretty much, Salakia, like I said, he defiled the temple. He gave the credence to act, viciously upon the nation, and he pursued that. But anyways, I wanted to just get a quick overview of what we're reading, but in particular leading up to First Maccabees, the 2nd chapter. Okay. But real quick, let's go First Maccabees 1. Let's just go up real quick. Let's start at 16. First Maccabees 1:16 says, "Now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms." Right, like I said, his conquest was ultimately to take down, the Ptolemaic dynasty at that time, dealing with Ptolemy Philometor the 6th. Okay. And you had all the conflicts that stem from that, which let's just keep reading verse 17, because we're leading up to something. Verse 17 says, "Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude of chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got to the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof." Right, his first conquest, okay, into Egypt. All right, because he had 2 that he set out. The first, went successful. I believe he captured a lot of major cities except Alexandria. All right. And, he left with spoils, so on and so forth, and returned to his province or to his area. Okay. And, through a span of times, it's just a lot of history that goes into it. Through a span of time, he decides to come back. All right. But verse 20, it says, "And after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in 143rd year." You see, he returned again and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and all the vessels thereof, and the table of showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the vials, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold, and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoken very proudly. Therefore there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they were, so that the princes and the elders mourned, the virgins and the young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and she that sat in the marriage chambers was in heaviness." Right. So, due to this act, all right, people were in distress. All right. The nation was in distress. All right. But, like I said, just getting some history going into what we're going to read. All right. Because at this time, you had men who sold out, who were in league with the heathen, okay, and just pretty much forfeited and bowed down, all right, to the will of Antiochus at this time. You see, and took a form into their ways, the Hellenistic ways that were being pushed in the earth. But continuing on, let's jump down. Let's jump to man, all this is good. But let's jump to 44. It says, for the king has sent letters by messengers into Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manners of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said, he should die. In the selfsame manner wrote he to his people, to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Right. So pretty much, ultimately what I'm doing is, another connected nation times now. But, you see, right, in modern day, this being set up, okay, that get down or lay down spirit. You're going to get with this or you're going to lay down, meaning you're going to be put to death. All right. And see, like I said, at this time, this, sore slaughter that Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, performed, okay, was heavy. All right. But he gave him a choice. It's either you're going to bow down to my will, get, with the program, or die. And that's the same spirit, all right, that Esau Edom is tapping back into, because we know ultimately the Seleucid line at this time were Edomites. All these men were Edomites, the four generals, etc., stemming from Macedon, so on and so forth. All right. We're all Edom. You see? So Esau is about to tap back into that ancient spirit. All right. Where he's going to come against the people, man. You see? But it reads, verse 52, it says, then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, every one that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land, right? So they conformed. All right. And like I said, Esau's about to tap into this same spirit. Okay. And ultimately, we know that he's going to come with that MOTB. All right. And what's the penalty for not taking it? Revelation 13th chapter, you're going to be put to death. Reading on, it says, verse 53, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor, protection. It says, now the 15th day of the month Casliu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. All right, so this was, what was being done in the land. Okay, like I said, you had men who conformed, women who conformed, either out of sheer fear or just saying, the hell with it. You had some, prior to this, like I said, mentioning, some names, men like Jason, etc. Okay, who, performed, all types of vicious acts, and had all types of malicious thoughts to the nation, to the people. Okay, and conformed and set up many devices to destroy us. You see, and to put us in a Hellenistic state. You see, so all this wickedness was happening, and a lot of wickedness was happening prior to Antiochus coming down. All right, and reaping havoc upon the nation. This is why we weren't protected during this time, because you got to think, prior to this, you had men like Heliodorus dealing with what was that, Seleucus, was it the fourth, or Seleucus, I believe, Philopator, if I'm not mistaken. All right, who reigned before Antiochus the fourth, his big brother, I would say. Okay, when he raised the taxes, and Heliodorus, went to collect, and the angels defended the temple, okay, etc. You see, so you had accounts like that had happened prior, but at this point, men like Jason, etc., had conformed. Okay, a lot of men, to the ways of the the ways of the Greeks. A lot of men's heart had already turned. So this time, the Lord just allowed it to happen. But continuing on, where we at? Let's jump down to all right, let's just keep going. Verse 55, it says, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law, which they found, they burnt them with fire. And whosoever was found with any the book of the testament, or if any committed to the laws, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. Thus did they by their authority unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of the Most High, at which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised, and they hanged the infants about their necks, and rifled their houses, and slew them that had circumcised them. Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and conformed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. See, so this is what I'm getting to. All right, like I said, connecting ancient times and now, ultimately connecting an ancient Edomite spirit to an ancient Israelite spirit. Okay? That ultimately harnesses what? Zeal, faith, okay, trust. All right, that these men had, who revolted and stood stiff at that time for the word of Yahweh Yahweh Shai. All right, we have to ultimately harness that spirit, Lord's will, in the times where, like I said, Edom is going to tap back into his ancient spirit. Verse 63, where ultimately he's, merciless. All right, fierce, savage. He's going to tap back into that hunter type nature. Verse 63, it says, wherefore the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died, and there was very great wrath upon Israel. Okay, so jump into chapter 2, 1 Maccabees 2:2. It says, in those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Jorib, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. He had 5 sons, Johanan, called Caddis, Simon called Thases, or Thasai, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Avarin, and Jonathan, whose surname was Aphis. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me, wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there, when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of the strangers. Her temple was become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation have not had a part in her kingdom, and gotten of her spoils? All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she has become a bond slave, right? Going into the land, you see? All the miseries and things that have been taken from it, even the people. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty, our glory is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. Man, just imagine seeing this, man. And, a man like this having zeal for Yahweh Yahweh Shai, okay, having to be having to witness this, man. All right, it says, then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city Modin to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came into them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Right, so he trying to conform them, you see? And this is what ultimately prompted me to, hit record, man. All right, was his response. So now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yet and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards, right? Because this was a notable family. All right, so pretty much he was trying to flatter, all right, Mattathias and his boys, his sons, to conform and to sacrifice to the idols of the heathen. But this is what he responded. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice. Man, just imagine this. It says, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers, man. You see? And this is the spirit, like I said, we have to harness in these times, man. All right, that courage, that zeal, ready to die if needs be for the word of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. Man, this is beautiful. Verse 21, it says, God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances, right? So, when time of trouble come, Esau's going to try to force us to do things, perform certain acts to show our allegiance to him. We got to stand stiff. And if death is presented unto us, hey, we got to take it, in knowing that we can be risen back up. Because ultimately, life and death is in the hands of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. Verse 22, it says, we will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion either on the right hand or the left. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin, according to the commandment, which thing when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to show his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar, man. This is beautiful, bro. This is our history. This is the what men have performed. All right. You see? And if you want, you can read the rest of the account, man. But this is beautiful, man. And we have, like I said, to harness this ancient spirit. I always bring out Romans 15, and this is the 4th chapter. The things written aforetime were written for our learning, man. We have to read. We have to know these accounts. Remember these accounts, man. All right. That, we will, Lord's will, be built up in like manner and perform the same beautiful feats, okay, that the men of old have performed, man. Okay, and then harness the attributes that these men had, Lord willing, to help boost our faith in this ministry, because we about to come into some crazy ass fucking times, man. It's about to get real. Esau's not playing, Trump not playing. This Edomite is on his last limb. Okay, he's in the corner. So this nigga about to go out swinging. Esau ain't no hoe ass nigga, man. Look, this is his history. Look at Antiochus. Look at, the men before him. He want that blessing, bro. And he gonna do anything and fight tooth and nail to get to it, man. So that was it through the spirit. Lord's will, this was edifying to whoever may receive it. Just through the spirit, connecting ancient times to now. Okay, dealing with 1st and 2nd Maccabees, or 1st Maccabees, the 1st chapter and the 2nd chapter. And like I said, if you want, you can read this further, and then when you go down into it even further, Mattathias does what he does, and then it goes into mighty men, who perform certain acts, so on and so forth. All right, see, mention prominent names in the scriptures, man. Man that we should look and turn to, to boost our faith. See, heavy chapter, heavy history, beautiful history, must know history. Alright, so Lord's will, this was edifying to whoever may receive it once more. Gonna give all glory and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rechak, Shalom.